come on up. We got about 15 minutes here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you all for being here. The floor is yours.
Mr. Chair.
Motion on sub.
Okay, we have a motion on the sub. Is there a second? There's a second from Senator Storm. All in favor say aye. The PSS 9, I believe, is before us.
The 2020 was a difficult year for Louisville, for our entire state, but particularly Louisville after the great tragedy of Breonna Taylor's loss and subsequent civil unrest and violence. To be brief, I was contacted last June about, is there nothing we can do to remove the mayor? He's weak and ineffectual. In research, it was clear that KRS 67C does not have a mathematical valid way of removing the mayor. It is, so started down this path of reforming the relationship of the mayor and the Metro Council completely. This bill reduces the mayor, the term of the mayor from 3 terms to 2, corrects removal of office procedure, which I've mentioned. It frees Metro Council to use their own legal counsel versus the county attorney, who often has the back of the mayor. Gives Metro Council the right to approve any settlement over $1 million. Gives Metro Council the right to approve not labor agreements, but again, those big settlements over $1 million, and there have been many, that without council approval. They go to the mayor's office, they are negotiated, and only after the press release is done does Metro Council know anything about it, but they have to budget to account for that. This also clarifies appointment authority and approvals for boards and commissions, and allows the chief to delegate certain duties to a deputy or an assistant chief, which in issues involving officer discipline, the old law was interpreted by the county attorney is that the chief physically had to be at every meeting. This would allow them to send a deputy. It increases transparency into the financial operations of the Urban Services District, which is the old city of Louisville's service district. It allows existing small cities to annex contiguous areas without Metro Council approval. I will let Senator Nemes talk about the sub change relative to annexation, but I'd like now to pass this to my colleague, Representative Nemes, to address the statutory framework of the Citizens Review and Accountability Board, which was necessitated by the passing of an ordinance by Louisville Metro Council in November. So, Representative Nemes.
Representative Nemes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I see that you guys in this committee save the best bills for last, and they seem to always have an HB in front of them. so thank you. Thank you for that. So Section 1 of the bill provides access to subpoena power from the Citizens Review Board. So our city decided that we needed a Citizens Review Board to improve the community relationship with our police department. And part of that is the ability to investigate and to make recommendations. So there will be investigations, robust investigations that go forward under the law that now exists in the ordinance that Louisville Metro has passed. One small but important component of that is the right to have subpoena power. Subpoena is a very awesome power, as we've recognized in this General Assembly by giving subpoena power to only one committee. A few years ago, we realized that Louisville Metro needed to have subpoena power, so we gave it to the Government Oversight Committee in the Ethics and Oversight Committee in Louisville Metro. And we said then, because we understood how awesome the power was, that power may not be delegated to any other committee or any other agency within the city. Fast forward a couple years, it's now important that other entities or another entity have access to subpoena. And that's why we've created, we've created what's in Section 1 of this bill that says if the Citizens Review Board needs to subpoena any papers or any testimony, they can request that of the Government Ethics and Accountability Committee that's already within Louisville Metro government. We decided to do that because as this General Assembly has decided with itself, that the subpoena power should not be given out broadly. And also, if the subpoena is requested, that elected officials be held accountable for any testimony or any papers that it require by subpoena, not request. Again, without the subpoena power, there will be a robust investigatory authority and powers of the Citizens Review Board, but with the access to it, we think it will be improved. So what they need to do, as I said, is they need to go through the Metro Ethics and Accountability Committee. We have taken the language that's already existing in the Child Fatality Review Board with respect to protection of privacy and making sure that the documents retain the original character that they had in the originating agency. So, for example, if documents are received from Louisville Metro Police, those documents, if they were not subject to the Open Records Act or not covered by the Open Records Act or protected by the Open Records Act, then they're not protected with the Citizens Review Board. If they were protected, then they remain protected. So it's of the originating agency. So we also made one other change on page 9 that's not in Section 1, but that is related to Section 1, and that is that subpoenaed persons can be current officers or they could be former officers, which is a very important expansion of the right to subpoena, because we don't want someone to engage in misconduct and then leave employment with Louisville Metro as an officer and then all of a sudden not be subject to the subpoena power. So that's, in a nutshell, Section 1. Take any questions?
I would like to, before you take a question, I would like to make a couple of comments, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead. Representative Miller.
In 2016, when we were still in the minority, we tried to get a direct subpoena power to the Louisville Ethics Commission. It was fought by the Fisher administration, and we failed. In 2017, we advanced the idea again in the House, direct subpoena power to the Ethics Commission, and the Senate, in their wisdom, recognizing how ultimately powerful that power is, chose to delegate it or give it to the Metro Council's Government Oversight and Committee. They do have, for Ethics Commission, the ability to delegate it to the Ethics Commission, because we all know what an Ethics Commission is. The Metro or the state executive branch and judicial branch or legislative branch ethics commissions have subpoena power. So that was a wise change. The Citizens Review and Accountability Board will be the first in Kentucky, to my knowledge. So it is new. I think it is prudent to allow them to create a track record before they are given the ability. The GOAC committee is able to delegate to them subpoena power. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Senator Nemes, would you like to explain what's in the sub real quick, and then we have a couple other people that need to testify and talk. So,
real quick, mostly it was technical changes, but there was one addition, and it wasn't Representative Miller, wasn't annexation, it was incorporation. And it gives the ability of an area within the outside of the city, not the inner city where they have the services, that is not already part of a existing city, to be able to go through the normal incorporation laws, which would be 66% of the people to incorporate. And if 75% wanted that live there, then the Metro Council would have to approve that. That's what besides a couple of little technical things you had. In Representative Nemes, yes, we are hearing the best of the best House bills late, but the best of the best bills are now being heard in the other chamber of the House. Thank you.
Senator Schroeder, do you have a question?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Somewhat of a question, somewhat of a comment. I know we're short on time. Representatives, thank you for your testimony. This was a bill, or an issue rather, perhaps, that groups started reaching out before the session even started talking to me about, which I always appreciate. One of my concerns then still remains to be one of my concerns today, and that is with the subpoena power, which, I believe is a big deal. Because we've seen Senator McGarvey's bill, I already had a chance to look into that much more closely. But I can tell you that what I appreciated with his bill. I felt like there was a checks and a balance when it came to having a circuit court judge, nonpartisan position, and sure, we all know there could be problems with any reviewer of a subpoena, but I felt like that was a little bit more removed, and so I guess my question is, was that considered? Would you still be willing to consider it with a floor amendment? And I'd be curious to hear your thoughts. Thank you.
I don't think the House will approve of that. Right now, it must be understood that this board that is newly existing does not have the ability to access subpoenas. And so we are moving a step forward in getting that done. It was something that the House has compromised on to get to where 309 is currently. We would not agree with the subpoena power being directly in the board's in the review board's hands right now, and that's what requiring court approval is. I'm an officer of the court. I send subpoenas all the time. A judge doesn't have a clue that subpoena is out there unless somebody tries to quash it. And also, even if we require the judge to specifically sign off on it like a warrant, which this is not a warrant, then that makes the judge part of the investigation. The judge ought not be there. The judge is there to review if there's any motions to quash, and he or she should not take a position up front. So if it's the normal process, you're an officer of the court, Senator Schroeder, if it's a normal process, the court never even knows it exists. So it's really not even, I mean, it's words to say it comes from the court, but it's not real. And if we make it real, then I think it's inappropriate because the court ought not be involved at that early level. And so I think with what this does, and we want checks and balances, this committee, it's required to have the proportionate number of Republicans and Democrats on the committee that are elected. And with a bipartisan committee, I think it provides the proper accountability. And if anyone misbehaves and submits subpoenas that they shouldn't, or doesn't submit subpoenas that they should, then I think the people of Louisville will hold those elected officials accountable. So we think 309 as it exists is further than many of us wanted to go, but we're wanting to operate in good faith to give the Citizen Review Board this meaningful additional investigatory tool. But I don't think 309 will pass if the subpoena power is changed meaningfully.
Senator Alvarado had a real quick question, and we'll go to Senator McGarvey.
Very quickly, so just two brief ones. How many committees in state government? I'm over here to the left, guys. How many committees in state government currently have subpoena power? We mentioned just one.
Government Oversight Investigations.
This would give how many committees in Louisville, in Metro Council? How many? Would just be the one? Or you mentioned there was another one that also had the ability to do subpoenas.
The only other one is if Metro Council votes to delegate subpoena power to the Ethics Commission for a specific case.
So there's two potentially.
Can I answer that?
Via that.
Let me, the lawyers here.
Senator Nemes, go ahead.
I'm sorry, Chairman. This bill does not give subpoena power. The Metro Council already has subpoena power. It's telling the board that they have to go through that council who has the subpoena power. Right. If we gave it as Senator McGarvey wanted, that would actually be given subpoena power for them to go to the court. It sounded better, you go to a judge, but it's actually given the board subpoena power, which this bill does not. This tells them they have to go through the Metro Council, right, who already has subpoena power.
Senator McGarvey.
Yeah, so I was going to wait till after President James commented, but I've got to jump in now that this has been brought up a few times. This absolutely does not provide for a robust investigation. It's not a good tool, and I think it's kind of a workaround so that the legislature can ultimately say they gave Louisville what it asked for in a 25-1 bipartisan vote, but it's not going to be there. And if this is going to be a tool to build trust and accountability with the police department, this is going to lead to obfuscation and frustration. Because I think you have to look at what the bill actually does and provides. This doesn't give the Civilian Review Board subpoena power, Senator Nemes just said. So I'm glad we're agreeing on that. This bill does not give the Civilian Review Board subpoena power. It also doesn't give the Civilian Review Board access to the information received. This goes to a partisan committee of the Metro Council who gets to make decisions on a partisan basis whether or not they should issue a subpoena. Then they don't have to give the Civilian Review Board the information. This bill states very clearly that it may give the board information. Well, what does that mean? We all know what that means. It means that we've created a body to have oversight. Now, this body, it's already there. We're not creating it in this bill. It's already there. But it was created to provide accountability and build trust. They can't fire anybody. They can't change policies. They can just make recommendations. We want to make sure they have the information. There's something even more troubling within the bill than that. This bill allows the Metro Council, partisan Metro Council, to subpoena anything they want to, but only from government employees. Think about the number of times when you look at other cities that have used this. You know, Atlanta says 90% of the time they use this for cell phone records of people not in the police department. Think about what happened with David McAtee. If you wanted to get security camera footage from the filling station across the street, you can't get that with this. It only goes to government actors, and it takes that authority, and it's not just the police department. You now have a partisan committee of the Metro Council that can subpoena anything they want from anybody in local government. So this goes really beyond what anybody in the city of Louisville has asked for, and is to the point now where I've talked to the president of the Metro Council, who's on the phone right now, to the people on the Metro Council who drafted the ordinance. Because this does not give the Civilian Review Board subpoena power, they would rather have nothing than have what's in this bill. And I think that's important for this state and local government committee to consider. Because we are here with a bill that the local government is not asking for. In fact, when we get to the other provisions of the bill, think about that. We're putting term limits in here. Now, I'm for term limits, but let's have a conversation about it. Let's include your cities in it. We created merger, and I went back and pulled the old articles in 2000. We created merger with a very clear and very simple statute that we were going to operate. This is 20 years ago. People think like merger just happened. In 2000, when merger passed in Louisville, it was the first merger in 30 years. It was the first merger that had won an election in 32 years. And Jacksonville was in 1968. Indianapolis was in 1970, but the Indiana state legislature actually forced that merger. Louisville had failed 3 previous mergers on election before that. And so what they said is, they didn't lay out all the specifics and what would happen here and there. What they said is, we're going to get rid of the county government. We had a county judge executive and a fiscal court that operates with much of what you're familiar with today. We said, we're going to get rid of that government. And we're going to run the county like we run the city, with a strong mayor, with a Metro Council, with these terms that are currently there. Partisan basis, 3 terms for a mayor. We're going in and doing this. I mean, look, there's some good things in this bill. I think the Metro Council deserves to have its own attorney. I think we need to talk about the annexation piece, but I think we need to talk about it in a way. This leaves it broadly open. So, for instance, if there's a municipal sales tax point, this could have big implications for what happens to commercial areas, and I don't think we're thinking those through as a committee. But I would look at, like I said, I was going to save my comments till after David James spoke, and I still want to hear what David James has to say. But I think you guys need to hear from the people in Louisville what's going on.
President James, you're on the line. If you could give a real succinct testimony. I apologize for making it short, but thank you for being here. If you could weigh in on this bill, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, committee, for allowing me to speak today, and I'll be very quick. I just would like to echo what Senator McGarvey just said. The Metro Council created the Civilian Review Board and the Inspector General's office to create accountability and trust with our citizens. And as you know, we've had a very rough year last year. And so having that trust and accountability is very important. And this bill doesn't give the Civilian Review Board subpoena power, and it doesn't require that the Metro Council even share that information. House Bill 309 won't even let the Metro Council get information from outside the government. As you know, many times the information that we need is the body camera footage. The body camera footage isn't stored by Metro government. It's stored by Taser Incorporated, not even in Kentucky. So we have to have the ability to do something outside of government with that subpoena power. The Metro Council, we really need the subpoena power to be with the Civilian Review Board and the Inspector General. It's just vitally important for us to be able to function that way. Lastly, I would say that if we can't do this the right way, I would rather see 309 not pass, because we're just going to create more frustration and upsetness in a city that desperately needs to have accountability and transparency. And this does not provide it in any way, shape, or form.
Very good. Thank you, President James. Is there somebody else on the line? Yeah, go
Maybe
ahead,
we respond
Representatives.
to-
If
if
y'all
you
want to
wanna
respond to
start,
that, and
and I'll
I'm trying
finish.
to find out if somebody's online to testify. Y'all go ahead.
Thank you,
real
Mr.
quick.
Chairman. It's an interesting concept to not pass 309 if we don't give full subpoena power. I think the House may agree with that on this particular provision. We're trying to give something, but let me just say this. To say that there's no accountability because it doesn't have subpoena power is wrong. This committee does not have subpoena power. It has oversight of pensions. It has oversight of local government. The Judiciary Committee does not have subpoena power. They can hold people accountable. The subpoena power is a small but important, but a small portion of investigations. The subpoena power is awesome power, and sometimes it's awful. And there's much accountability within the Citizen Review Board and within Louisville Metro government. And so if we did want to have a floor amendment, by the way, to address President James's concern on having access to police body cameras, obviously that's something we would support. We're not against that. What we're saying is that it should be limited. And by the way, we didn't expand it, or we expanded the subpoena power in this by saying former officials. But if we want to go a little bit further in saying when it's related to an investigation that they have access to body cams, we think it already covers that. But if it needs to be clarified, we're for that. So if we want to drop Section 1 out of 309 altogether, that's a conversation we can have. But we think we're giving more power than currently exists.
And I would say, as a former co-chair of the Government Accountability Committee in Louisville, I think it is, and it is very clear in statute, Metro Council can set their own rules. If they wish to allow the Inspector General to ask questions of any witness, that is within their purview. It is their rules that dictate this. Regarding the mayor's term, president, governor are two-term limits. If you look at the largest cities in the U.S., the majority have a two-term limit. You look at the largest 20 cities in America, they have a two-term limit. If you look at the third term of Mayor Jerry Abramson, it was not good. If you look at the third term of Greg Fisher, it's been a disaster. In fact, Secretary of Transportation Jim Gray voluntarily didn't run for a third term because he knew they are problematic, they lose focus, and trouble happens when you lose focus.
Okay. Senator McGarvey, real quick.
Really quickly, I don't think Mayor Abramson had a third term. I think he stopped after his second. Just want to clear up that point. I want to go back to subpoena powers really quickly and talk about the compromise here. We talk about compromise. The Metro Council asked for the Inspector General and the Civilian Review Board to have subpoena power. Where we came up with a compromise in working with many groups around Louisville, Republican, Democrat, the business community, activists, people, demanding to be heard. What we came up with was this idea that a circuit court judge is the check. And Representative Nemes, this is different than what an officer of the court does. Because what needs to happen is the circuit court judge would actually have to sign off and approve the subpoena. The difference here, and while it seems semantic, I think it's really important, is that a Metro Council committee made up of partisan members who have a clear political agenda at times. Not that this legislature would ever have a similar partisan agenda. They're going to decide whether a subpoena should be issued. A circuit court judge, we've determined, who's a nonpartisan person, has familiarity with these processes, would decide whether it is proper to issue a subpoena. And while that difference may seem minor, I think it's very important for building that trust and accountability. It also builds in a system by which even the people whose records are being subpoenaed could make a challenge. Aside from the protections we have in the bill that allow that, you could go to move to quash the subpoena.
You can do that here too.
You could do that, but this would apply to everybody. They could get what they needed or they couldn't. There would be a check and a balance there. And so I think what you're hearing people say is it's not that we don't want subpoena power. It's we want the Civilian Review Board to have subpoena power. What we've established is this bill doesn't give it to the Civilian Review Board. We've listened to those requests that there be some check and balance on it. And I think that's where you have the circuit court judge and where you have members of this committee who've supported that approach in the past. And you get into the other stuff in this bill, and I think it is not appropriate for many of the reasons mentioned. But, I mean, I think there could be a path forward for this bill. I'd like to see a path forward for this bill so the Metro Council does get its own lawyer. I think President James would agree with me that the Metro Council should have its own attorney. You get no fights from us up here. But also, 25 to 1, including 3 former Louisville Metro police officers. The president of the Louisville FOP voted to create a civilian review board and an inspector general and asked that those entities be given subpoena power. Not that some point down the road a committee of partisan Metro Council members may decide to let an inspector general ask questions. Well, why have an inspector general if you have to have a legislative body that gets to decide whether they can ask questions?
That's not what this bill is. It's subpoena. That's very different. It's not like they don't want me an investigation. Let me say one thing real quickly, Senator. We feel this as well. We want this committee to be, this decision review board to be successful. I live in Louisville. It's important to me. It's my city too. Grew up in the South End. Now I represent the East End. My whole family are Louisville folk. It's our city. It's your town. It's my town. We want it to be right. We know there are problems with the community and the police relationship. We want to improve that. But let me suggest this. You keep saying partisan group. These are the elected people of our town. So the elected people will have control. And do you think that a supermajority Republican House of Representatives would be coming to this committee saying, let's give it to a committee, to a government that's dominated by Democrats, if we didn't believe it was the right way forward? It would be very easy for us to take our partisan hats and say, let's take it from the Democrats and Metro Council and give it to a judge. But we think it's important that elected officials be held accountable. That's what we're coming for.
And not only that, Senator, is we did not find 12 saints to be on the Citizens Review and Accountability Board. If you check the partisan affiliation of those members, they are more partisan than the Metro Council. But I will say this, in summary,
Please.
is do not let the perfect be the enemy of the good. We will be back in 10 months.
Motion.
There will be a time to hire an inspector general and have a track record. Thank you.
I promise not to let the perfect be the enemy of the good. I just don't think this is good enough.
Yep. Senator Thayer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Wow, there's a lot to unpack here, especially for those of us who don't live in Louisville and aren't as familiar with the day-to-day issues. And I just want to state right off the bat, while the Metro Council is certainly within its purview to create a citizen review panel, I'm opposed to them philosophically. I think we have citizen review panels. They are called the elected Metro Council, the elected Fiscal Court, the elected City Council, the elected City Commission. And they ought to be doing the things that civilian review panels are given the power to do, because a civilian review panel is not accountable to the voter. And we've talked about that in this committee for 18 years, about appointed individuals having less accountability because they're one step removed from being accountable to the voters in an election. So I don't like civilian review panels, so I've got a problem with the bill just on that, because I feel like I might be voting to validate civilian review panels, which I'm philosophically opposed to. And I do agree with you, Representative Nemes, and my colleague, Leader McGarvey's continuing reference of a partisan panel. Well, that's the way it's made up. I mean, I don't like that Louisville is 2-1 Democrat to Republican, but that's the way it is, and people have a chance to change that every time there's a Metro Council election. So I do like that level of accountability. But we had a very deep discussion on Leader McGarvey's bill and caucus and decided not to pass it. I'm not sure, for some of the same reasons we couldn't pass his bill, that we can pass your bill, either in this committee today or on the floor of the state Senate. I think we may want to consider passing over it today. I think the chairman's going to have another meeting tomorrow and see if some of these questions that have been brought up by members of both parties on this panel can be answered before we move this bill forward.
We do have another, it's going to be scheduled meeting tomorrow at 10 o'clock, and I believe that would be probably the best avenue forward for this bill, if we can, because we've already kind of almost lost our quorum here, and the feedback's not good. So at this point, if we could hold this over till tomorrow. And Representative Miller, we also still have your two pension bills as well for tomorrow at 10 o'clock. Sure. And we will try to have a full committee here where we can actually vote for this. I knew coming in that this was, this is an important bill for everybody that's involved in this. I wanted to give it some air. I wanted to see what the comments are. I know you've put a lot of work into it, and maybe tonight y'all can put some more work into this and see if we can move forward. But closing comments from those testifying, and we'll let it be. Any closing comments or remarks? If not,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Look forward to seeing you tomorrow at 10.
Okay, tomorrow at 10 o'clock then.
Thank you.
Real quick before we go, I'm sorry. I had somebody online, Miss Hopkins, if you could give a couple of minutes, or if you'd like to join us tomorrow at 10 o'clock, would that work for you?
Chair, I'm happy to do either one. I think Senator McGarvey and President James covered the Section 1 of the bill very well. I would not want the committee to lose sight of the concerns we have regarding Section 2 of the bill regarding pre-approval of settlement offers, and I'm happy to address that more completely tomorrow if that is preferable to you.
That would be great. So the motion is to hold over House Bill 309 to tomorrow's meeting at 10 a.m. as well as House Bill 113 and House Bill 261. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor say aye. Aye. Okay. Those items are held over till tomorrow.
10 tomorrow.
10 a.m. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. We stand adjourned.